In 2006, South African police arrested a guy named Vusi Matlala in connection with a brazen cash-in-transit heist. However, the charges did not stick. He was ultimately released without conviction. What nobody realized then was that this wasn't the end of the story. It was only the prologue, because the man they had briefly caged would go on to become one of the most feared criminals in South African history. This is the story of Johannesburg's evil gangs, and the kingpin who turned the city into his personal hunting ground. Johannesburg's underworld is not just dangerous, it is a ticking time bomb. Behind the busy streets and bright city lights hides a dark empire built on fear and power. And at the heart of it all was Vusi Matlala. Before the headlines and the prison cell, Vusi Matlala was the picture of success in South Africa. To the public, he was the man who had it all. Luxury cars like Bentleys and Ferraris, parked outside a mansion in one of Johannesburg's richest suburbs, sharp suits, and the confidence of a self-made millionaire. He moved among the elite, his name tied to wealth and influence. But behind the polished image was a darker truth. Matlala built his fortune through one of South Africa's most controversial moneymakers, government tenders. In a system meant to empower black entrepreneurs, the tenderpreneur became a familiar figure, someone who grew rich from massive state contracts. Matlala didn't just take part in it, he dominated it. His companies won contracts worth hundreds of millions, from healthcare to security. One of the biggest was a 360 million rands deal, that's about 20 million USD, through his firm, Medicare 24, to provide medical services to the South African Police Service. On paper, his success looked clean. In reality, investigators later found warning signs everywhere, suggesting his success came from more than just business skill. To understand the predator, you must first understand the place that made him. Vusi Matlala grew up in Alexandra, a 1-square-mile township built on survival. Known as Alex, it sits right next to Sandton, Africa's richest square mile. From the streets of Alex, you can see the wealth of Sandton, glass towers, expensive cars, and money everywhere. But you cannot touch it. That constant reminder creates a deep hunger. In Alex, it can turn you into a dreamer or a fighter. The township is a maze of narrow streets, alive with noise and movement. Corrugated shacks stand beside brick houses, and thousands scrape together, living in the chaos. Here, Matlala learned early that power is not given, it is taken. He was shaped by this world, and he was determined to rise above it. Before chasing bigger money, Matlala first mastered one of Johannesburg's most dangerous trades, the taxi industry. In South Africa, taxis are more than transport. They are a cash-heavy, violent business where territory means power. This is where the so-called Alex Mafia thrived. They were not an official gang, but a feared network of men who controlled the township's key economic lifelines. They built alliances, intimidated rivals, and kept close ties with police and politicians to protect their power. Matlala started here, learning enforcement and intimidation. He saw firsthand how controlling a vital community resource, like the taxi routes that took people to work, gave you immense power over their lives. It was here he allegedly built his reputation as a man who got things done, a man you did not cross. This was his apprenticeship. He was learning how a criminal enterprise worked from the ground up, mastering the balance of violence, business acumen, and networking that was necessary to survive and thrive. But the taxi industry, as profitable as it was, had a ceiling. Matlala's ambition was far greater than controlling a few taxi ranks. He saw a much bigger prize. He realized that the same tactics he learned in the gritty, violent world of taxis could be applied to the seemingly legitimate world of government contracts. The real money wasn't in taxis. It was in tenders. This was his pivotal leap from a street-level enforcer to a white-collar criminal mastermind. He began to apply the brutal logic of the Alex Mafia to the world of municipal bidding. Why compete for a contract when you could intimidate your competitors into withdrawing? Why follow the rules when you could bribe an official to give you the inside track? The violence and fear that secured a taxi route could also secure a multi-million rand contract to repair a substation. This was the moment the cat truly began his hunt. leaving the streets of Alex behind to stalk a far more lucrative prey, the city of Johannesburg itself. He was no longer just a gangster, he was becoming a tenderpreneur, armed with the ruthlessness of the streets and a newfound hunger for corporate-level wealth. A powerful criminal empire is not built on theft alone, it is built on control. Vusi Cat, Matlala's real skill and the source of his alleged crimes, was creating a cycle where destruction and profit fed each other. He didn't just steal from the city, he broke it, then charged the city to fix it. He was both the disease and the cure. It often started with sabotage. In the middle of the night, crews moved with precision to damage the city's most important infrastructure. They ripped out copper cables or wrecked key substations, cutting power to entire neighborhoods. This wasn't random vandalism. It was the spark for an emergency that would force the city to skip its slow, tender process. When thousands of homes were suddenly in darkness, desperation made the city easy prey. Legitimate repair teams would arrive, but never finish the job. Their equipment was stolen, workers were threatened and chased away. And just when the community had lost hope, a solution appeared. Men from Matlala's network, pretending to be local business forums or community leaders, offered a deal, pay them a huge fee, and the problem would vanish. This was not protection from random criminals. It was protection from the very people causing the chaos. But this was only step one. The real goal was the city's official multi-million rand repair contract. Once the syndicate controlled the site through fear, they made sure their own shell companies were the only bidders left. Competitors were scared off, leaving the path clear for Matlala's businesses. With the contract in hand, the city's money flowed straight into the syndicate's pockets. Corruption inside the city made it easy. Officials on the payroll approved bids from fake companies, signed off on false invoices, and ignored the fraud. The city paid for workers who didn't exist, expensive materials that were cheap and of poor quality, and repairs that were never even done. It was a complete cycle, starting with a blackout, ending with millions stolen, and all of it hidden behind the mask of legitimate business. For years, whispers about Vusi Cat, Matlala's darker side, stayed hidden in Johannesburg's elite circles. That changed in 2023 because of what happened to Tebogo Thobejane, a well-known actress and entrepreneur who had once been Matlala's partner. In broad daylight, her car was sprayed with bullets in what looked like a scene from a gangster film. She survived, but the attack shattered Matlala's image as a legitimate businessman. The investigation pointed directly to him as the man behind the hit. Prosecutors charged him with attempted conspiracy to commit and money laundering. The shock grew when his wife, Tsakani, was also accused of helping plan the attack. For many, it was a clear message. Crossing Vusi Matlala could cost you your life. This was not a simple business dispute. Prosecutors claimed it was the work of a man willing to use extreme violence to settle scores and silence anyone who opposed him. The case was only the beginning. As police dug deeper, they uncovered links between Matlala and one of South Africa's biggest corruption scandals, the Tembisa hospital case. This was no small fraud. Nearly R3 billion in public funds had been stolen through inflated and fake contracts. One of Matlala's companies, Black AK Trading, was flagged for receiving millions in suspicious payments from the hospital. This scandal took on an even darker tone when investigators connected it to the murder of Babita Deokaran. Babita was a senior finance manager at the Gauteng Department of Health and a whistleblower. Just weeks before she was down outside her home in 2022, she had identified Matlala's companies as part of the massive corruption network at Tembisa Hospital. She tried to stop the looting, and for that, she paid with her life. While Matlala has not been charged with her murder, investigators believe the corruption and the cases are closely linked. The stolen money was not just for luxury cars and mansions. It allegedly funded a system of violence to protect the entire criminal network. As police dug deeper, the Tebogo Thobejane case started to look less like an isolated act of rage and more like a standard business practice for Matlala's organization. Chilling connections began to emerge, linking his syndicate to other high-profile assassinations. One of the names that surfaced was that of DJ Somebody, a popular musician who was down in a hail of bullets in 2022. Investigators started to see a terrifying pattern, from silencing a whistleblower like Babita Deokaran to allegedly attempting to eliminate a former partner like Tebogo Thobajane. The evidence began to paint a picture of a powerful syndicate that used murder as a tool to protect its interests, enforce its rules, and expand its empire. For a criminal empire to survive, it needs more than and money. It needs protection from the very people who are supposed to enforce the law. As investigators pulled apart Vusi, Cat, Matlala's network, one question kept coming up. How had he managed to get away with so much for so long? The answer was more disturbing than anyone expected. It appeared that Matlala had not only bribed a few corrupt officers, he had allegedly built a wall of protection at the highest levels of South Africa's law enforcement, turning those meant to catch him into his most valuable allies. The man who blew the lid off this system was not an outsider, but a top-ranking policeman who decided he could not keep quiet any longer. Lieutenant General Nhlanhla Mkhwanazi, the respected police commissioner for KwaZulu-Natal, called a press conference that sent shockwaves through the country. Calm but firm, he laid out how a criminal kingpin had allegedly captured parts of the state itself. He spoke plainly, naming names. Starting with the most powerful policeman in South Africa. The heart of Mkhwanazi's claim was explosive. He alleged that Matlala had paid a huge bribe directly to Police Minister Senzo Mchunu. The goal was clear: get the minister to disband the political task team. This elite unit was not just another police branch. It was the team closing in on Matlala's syndicate. They were getting too close, so according to Mkhwanazi, Matlala paid to have them shut down completely. If true, it meant the country's top police official had taken money to protect one of its most dangerous criminals. Mkhwanazi went further, explaining how Matlala allegedly used his wealth to secure loyalty from powerful politicians. He funded their parties, sponsored events, and paid for luxury travel. In exchange, they gave him something no gangster could buy on the street: immunity from the law. To back up his claims, Mkhwanazi revealed that investigators had piles of evidence, including WhatsApp messages and financial records showing the flow of money from Matlala's accounts to well-connected political figures. The corruption ran so deep that over 120 criminal case files tied to Matlala and his associates had been tampered with or had vanished entirely from police archives. The picture was now clear. Vusi, Cat. Matlala was not just avoiding arrest. He had allegedly bought the people in charge of arresting him, turning the law itself into his shield. The moment Lieutenant General Nhlanhla Mkhwanazi stepped away from the microphone, South Africa felt the shock. His words were not just an accusation. They were a direct strike at the heart of the country's power structure. People across the nation struggled to process what they had heard. The country's top police minister was accused of working for a crime boss, and the man making the claim was one of the most senior police officials in the country. It was no longer just a criminal scandal. It was a national crisis that made ordinary citizens question whether anyone at the top could be trusted. The impact of the press conference was immediate. In Parliament, politicians scrambled to distance themselves from the growing scandal. On the streets, people debated it in taxis, at street markets, and over dinner tables. The story spread faster than wildfire, not just because of the corruption, but because it was tied to money laundering and the kind of political betrayal that shakes a country to its core. President Cyril Ramaphosa knew he had to act quickly. Days after the allegations exploded in the media, he announced the suspension of Police Minister Senzo Mchunu. The move stunned the country. It was rare for a minister to be removed so suddenly, especially one accused of taking bribes to protect a suspected criminal kingpin. But Ramaphosa did not stop there. He announced the creation of a full judicial commission of inquiry. This was not an ordinary investigation. A judicial commission is one of the most powerful tools available to a president. Led by a judge, it can summon anyone to testify under oath. That means politicians, senior police officers, and business leaders could be forced to answer questions in public. Documents could be seized. Bank records could be examined line by line. The commission's mission was simple but dangerous. Dig into Mkhwanazi's claims, find out how deep the corruption went, and reveal how Vusi Cat Matlala's empire had been able to grow unchecked for so many years. The country braced itself for a political showdown that would be played out under the glare of live television cameras. While the political storm gathered strength, Matlala was far from his former life of power and wealth. He now lives inside Kagosi Mampuru II Correctional Center in Pretoria, in the CMAX section. This was not a regular prison. CMAX is built for the most dangerous criminals in South Africa. Every movement is controlled. Every door is locked with heavy steel. In this world, there are no designer clothes, no private jets, and no expensive champagne. There is only a narrow bed, cold walls, and the daily routine of a prisoner stripped of his freedom. Yet even in CMAX, Matlala remained a figure of fascination. Each time he was taken to the Alexandra Magistrates Court, crowds and journalists gathered. Cameras caught every moment, from his arrival in a prison van to the way he avoided eye contact with reporters. Prosecutors were preparing to merge the many charges against him into a single, massive trial. It would cover everything from the attempted of actress Tebogo Thobajane to the billions lost in government fraud. The case promised to be one of the most explosive in South Africa's history. Then came the discovery that sent fresh waves of fear through the investigation. During a routine search of his cell, prison officials found an illegal mobile phone. The find was not just a rule violation, it was a warning. If Matlala still had a phone, he could still reach the outside world. He could give orders to his syndicate, tamper with evidence, or intimidate witnesses, all from behind the walls of one of the country's most secure prisons. It was proof that even in chains, Vusi Cat Matlala's shadow still stretched far beyond his cell. The arrest had exposed the rot in the system. The real question now was whether the system was strong enough to bring him down for good. When Vusi Cat Matlala was brought into Alexandra Magistrates Court on the cold morning of Friday, July 11, 2025, the atmosphere was tense. Shackled in leg irons and flanked by a wall of armed officers, he cut a very different figure from the confident businessman the public once knew. His wife, Tsakani, appeared with him in the dock, but was quickly granted bail because of her health and her role as a mother. All eyes were on the man who had once seemed untouchable, now standing shoulder to shoulder with his co-accused, Musa Kakana and Tiago Floyd Mabusela. Together, they faced a list of charges that could bury them for decades. Attempted conspiracy to commit money laundering, fraud, and their alleged role in a failed assassination plot against actress Tebogo Thobajane. The courtroom was heavy with the sense that this was a turning point. Prosecutors laid out what they described as clear, damning evidence. They had bank records showing suspicious transfers and phone data mapping his communications with key figures in the alleged plot. The paper trail and digital fingerprints told a story of money moving in the shadows and plans being coordinated in secret. But Matlala's legal team came out swinging. They accused the state of holding back important documents, claiming the case was being built on incomplete files and last-minute disclosures. The magistrate, unimpressed by the bickering, ordered both sides to get their paperwork in order and focus on the facts. The hearing was pushed to August 26, 2025. To allow time for the state to share all outstanding evidence and to merge related cases already sitting in the Pretoria West and Littleton courts. By the end of July 2025, it was clear that this trial would not be quick or simple. New charges had been added. More dockets had been pulled in. Behind the scenes, investigators were still sifting through political connections, security breaches inside prison, and the possibility that Matlala's influence had not been fully cut off. The case had grown into a legal storm, one where the stakes were as high as they could get. The verdict, whenever it finally comes, will not just decide the fate of Vusi Cat Matlala. It will test whether South Africa's justice system can bring down a man accused of using power, money, and violence to bend the country to his will. When the final verdict is read and the last gavel falls, it might seem easy to close the book on Vusi Cat Matlala. People will remember the flashy businessman who lived like a king on stolen public money, the alleged gangster who could order a hit without blinking, and the political fixer who bought protection at the highest levels of power. But to see Matlala only as one man's story is to miss the bigger, more dangerous truth. He is not just a lone villain. He is the product of a broken system, a living warning of how deep the rot has spread in South Africa. Matlala's rise is the story of state capture brought to life. This is not a fancy political term. It is a reality where the walls between government, business, and organized crime are torn down. His alleged playbook is brutally simple. First, exploit the system. Use front companies to win huge government contracts. Drain billions meant for hospitals, schools, and basic services. Then, take that stolen fortune and turn it into a build a private army. Fund a syndicate that silences whistleblowers, crushes competitors, and terrifies anyone who might speak out. Finally, use the same dirty money to buy a shield of protection. Pay off police officials, sponsor politicians, turn ministers into your personal employees. It is a cycle that feeds itself. The corruption funds the and the keeps the corruption alive. The press conference held by Lieutenant General Nanla Mkhwanazi did more than just pull back the curtain on one man's crimes. It forced the nation to stare into an ugly mirror. His allegations showed a country where the people meant to protect the public can be bought, where the law can be bent for the right price, and where criminals can operate in the open because they know they are untouchable. The judicial inquiry now underway, along with Matlala's trial, is about more than putting one man in prison. It is a for the country's future. Will this be the turning point when South Africa finally says enough? Will it lead to a purge of the corrupt elite and a rebuilding of the institutions meant to defend the public? Or will it fade into history as just another scandal? Another case where the powerful walk free and the system stays broken. The truth about the gangs in Johannesburg is that they are not just street thugs with the real power lies in the offices of businessmen and government officials who create the conditions for these gangs to grow. Vusi, Cat. Matlala may be the face of this story, but the deeper evil is the system that allows men like him to believe they can buy a country and destroy anyone who stands in their way. The to bring him down is not just about justice for his alleged victims. It is a test to prove whether South Africa still believes that no one is above the law.